There are we only got a couple more here, so I won't waffle on too long, but because I could talk all day about how Red Bull break my heart, but I won't. Um, there are a lot of, and I use this term complaint loosely because it's just, the anti-MLS echo chamber, right, on Twitter and elsewhere. But there are a lot of complaints that lend towards the idea that MLS is only in it for the money. They don't really care about the general fan experience. And I think that that's a very broad, overreaching statement where you can pick it apart and say, okay, in this area you're wrong, but in this area you're right. But I'd love to hear your thoughts and if there's a balance between the two and how that may or may not hurt the league in terms of its general growth and maybe how we can fix that.
Yeah, they didn't help themselves with that complaint this year, did they? Um,
No, no,
I
no.
think the U.S. Open Cup decision was extremely obtuse. Not for that at all. I think certain other areas that they go into, just some of their, even down to their pricing when it comes to, their jerseys and stuff like that, is maybe more American capitalistic than we'd like to see. And it kind of feeds into that narrative. That said, I do think there are some good owners in this league that really want to push the game forward. Not all of them, certainly not. There's certainly some owners I'd like to see just sell and walk away. And I think they probably still have too much sway within the league. But, even when you look at how MLS has gone about building these stadiums, for the most part, they pay for them themselves. They made these stadiums very fan centric, huge supporter sections, freestanding supporter sections now. They built some great atmospheres. Yeah, do they overprice messy games and stuff like that, which ticks people off for sure. But I got to give them some credit. I just think it's a mixed bag when you're looking at greedy owners, and I think it sort of feeds into all the pro rel discussion that constantly buzzes around American soccer, and the fact that they're cheap owners that are just looking to do this to make money. They're not in it for any kind of a sporting atmosphere. And yeah, I don't necessarily agree with that all the way across the board, but they've made some head scratching decisions too, where it's just like, man, you guys got to get out of your own echo chamber. And I know you're doing all these fan surveys, but maybe just go into the stands and talk to fans. If you're talking about doing something like that where you're pulling teams out of Open Cup, just go into the stands, go into St. Louis's stands, because a lot of them didn't show up for those games, and that put a huge dent in what you were trying to do for Leagues Cup. So I think maybe they just need to kind of get out of their own echo chamber, talk to fans a little bit more, connect with them a little bit more directly. Sometimes that's really hard for corporations to do, but I think there's some truth to it. I also think there's some areas where, MLS has been a good partner for trying to grow the game. I mean, 25 years ago, if you would have told me that every team had an academy, basically every team was operating out of a 40, 50, $150 million training facility, and they had a fully funded reserve league that was professional in nature, I would have been like, that sounds pretty good to me. So they made steps, but I do think they need to do a better job of not just connecting with their fans, but trying to connect with fans of USL teams, trying to connect with fans of Liga MX, trying to just make it about the sporting side of things. And that's where kind of go back to what I was talking about before with like, just make sure your teams have an ability to compete. You don't have to win every competition with Liga MX. You don't have to go down to Copa Libertadores and win, but you can't get embarrassed.
Right.
You can't have the gap be so big that everybody just realizes, hey, you're not really setting this thing up to be the best league. So that's really where I think that area you can make money. You can have your valuations go up to a billion, 2 billion, $3 billion, but you also got to win. And I think that's what you kind of talked about it. American fans, A, we want to win, and B, we want to see people that are aggressive and they're trying to win. You see that in the other sports. You see it in our Olympic sports. It's about winning. And yet we're as you mentioned, we're stable now. If we win internationally, a lot of this MLS hater stuff will go by the wayside. But at this point, you've done all the legwork. Next couple of years coming out of the World Cup, it's a huge opportunity. Are you going to loosen the strings? That's going to be the question. And if you don't, then all the criticism about, they're just in it for the money, they're just in it for the franchise value, um, you know, putting more money in their pocket, I think rings pretty true, to be honest with you.
Yeah,
That's as somebody that's followed this for, 30 years and, really hopes that the league grows because I love the sport.
yeah,
But I think you got to look at it. You got to be honest with yourself too, and the decision makers in the league. You got to hold them accountable. That's the only way we're going to see change. I mean, perfect example is what happened in Columbus a few years ago, and then what happened in LA. They held their teams to a standard. They fought for them, and it resulted in probably the two of the most entertaining, successful teams we've seen in recent years. So I think it's totally fair for MLS fans to go to their teams and hold them accountable. And one of the changes that we saw was now that MLS Next Pro players are going to have the ability to play more first team, especially in cup competitions, which hopefully will lead to, a full return of all MLS teams to the US Open Cup. And that's about fans in St. Louis. That's about fans in LA. That's about fans in New York, all across the league saying, no, man, we're not good with this. And we want you to care about the actual sporting side, the history of the game. Leagues Cup's great. I like Leagues Cup, but we got to connect with the fans on a level. And soccer fans,
100%.
by and large, they're people that believe in the actual sporting side of the game, and they're not just fans of MLS. I don't know any MLS fan that's just a fan of MLS. They are, we can see, soccer throughout the globe. And see every league, basically every top league in the world, every single weekend, every single midday. We can watch Champions League. This is in my opinion, for all the shtick Americans get about calling it soccer, I think for the most part, if you're looking at actual soccer fans, we're extremely well informed, and you're not going to fool anybody with gimmicks and tricks. So just win, man. Just win. Just put a good product out on the pitch. Try to put the best product out on the pitch you can. Don't drive yourself into bankruptcy, but try to put the best product on the pitch if you can. And I think that solves a lot of these anti-MLS issues. And right now, are they doing that? Probably not. Probably
Right.
not. They could probably do more, given how much money some of these teams are driving.
Yeah. Well, and I think it kind of ties back to the idea of what we're talking about with the salary cap, right? Early on, or the roster rules, right? Early on, you needed to focus on keeping things tight, making money, and doing all this stuff. But like we've talked about, we are stable now. We have all of that stuff, and you are turning profits, relative profits in terms of your overall profile year over year, and you're worth like multiple billions of dollars. Like, let's be real here. Like, you aren't just like pulling change out of your pocket. Like, this is all I have for you. Like, we know how much money you have. So now it's how can you change the mindset? And it's way easier said than done, especially with people who are billionaires, because you don't become billionaires by accident. You do things intentionally.
Well, just
Um,
to, just to put it in perspective a little bit,
uh-huh.
this is Forbes. This is estimates. You know, we don't know this to be true. It's not necessarily market tested, but they estimate the total franchise valuations of MLS to be $20 billion. 20 billion. The overall spend on the first teams this year, less than 800 million. I mean, it's hard to go to a fan when they're seeing Forbes say, you know, Inter Miami could be worth $2 billion next year, and they're spending $60 million in the first team.
Right.
And they're
Eh,
being as aggressive as they possibly can be.
Right, and at no fault of their own, they'd love to go
Yeah.
out and spend that, right? But yeah, and then it's how do you balance that out? And we say all the time, and you kind of I tried not to rope this in because it can go on forever, but this whole U.S. Open Cup versus Leagues Cup thing, you're right. Fan experience is not always where is the most money spent, right? I completely agree that we say it all the time. Connor would say it right now is we like Leagues Cup. It's different. It's fun. It's unique. It's got a lot that it can be improved upon, right? We can go and split US versus Mexico and play in different stadiums. We can do a whole bunch of stuff. And again, there's a whole reason why we don't do that, and we get it. But there's no reason not to play or not to give teams the decision to play in the Open Cup, right? And by that we mean if you want to take your youth players and just run a youth team out there, go right ahead, right? But MLS held themselves back because they had it in their CBA where it's like you only had four call-ups or whatever. And that right there, now you're taking out because a lot of those teams will play in different stadiums and won't play in the main stadium, right? So Red Bull, for example, go out to Montclair and play, where they would play in Harrison for their home games, Montclair for their other games. Like that's a whole market that may not be able to make it out to Harrison every game, who's now like, okay, I can come watch you guys play at Montclair. Oh, well, now you're only going to play the second team. I can watch the second team play every week. And I don't because it's a second team. There's no reason to do that. But even if it's a second team branded as the first team, it's just a different market you can reach. And it's just there's definitely a balance in there. And I would believe, and I think I would speak for Connor as well, that it's time to shift that focus from how much money can we make without saying, okay, let's go burn it all now, right? But how much money can we make and transition into how can we take that money and turn it into fan retention, fan attraction, and then grow us, not just my pockets or what have you, because that in the long term is going what I believe is going to be the make or break, right? You don't get to be a top five, top 10 league if your stadiums are packed out at 65% every week because and I use that as a Red Bull example because I will show up to Red Bull. It was better this year, but in years past it was 65% and 90% of the 65% were wearing Man U, Juventus, Barcelona kits. They were just there because it was something to do on a Saturday night, right? How can you change that to be we want you to be Red Bull supporters, not soccer fans who are watching a Red Bull game. And that I think is one of the big steps that we need to make as a league to take us from